There was abuse, and through that abuse, I began running away. I took off, and it was actually through hitchhiking that prostitution became a reality for me. So I was compromising myself sexually for survival purposes with grown men, and I was just a child. I had been in all this confusion. Nothing made sense in my life. And all of a sudden, I could see. And it was so instantaneous, and it was a true miracle.
Welcome to Pure Passion. My name is Colette Bercue. It is sad but true, but in this wealthiest nation on the earth, children are abused and abandoned on a daily basis and do not know where to turn. Kristy Childs was just such a girl. She was so horribly abused by her family that she had to run away in order to stay alive. Hitchhiking across the country at the age of 11, she was immediately preyed upon by men who would give her a place to stay for the night in exchange for sex, and by countless truckers at truck stops. The only way to have a roof over her head at night was to allow herself to be abused and eventually sold by a pimp. This is one amazing lady with one amazing story to tell. Let's gaze into the heart and mind of that little girl who became the director of a ministry to prostitutes called Veronica's Voice.
I'm from a small town in Missouri, and growing up, I had a very non-existent relationship with my father, who was there, but not there. He worked, and that's about all I know, and I don't remember much about him. My mother, I believe, probably suffered from depression. She slept a lot and was not real engaged with me. As a child, I really don't remember a lot. I know there was a lot of confusion, and I didn't understand a lot of things. And when my parents did split up and my stepfather came into the picture, things just multiplied 100 times. And there was abuse. And through that abuse, I began running away to escape the abuse. And the abuse seemed to totally be towards me. I didn't know who to turn to. And I did turn to some family on his side, on my stepfather's side of the family at one point, and they just delivered me back to the family. And so every time I would run away from this abusive environment, I would be taken back to that abusive environment. The state labeled me as incorrigible because I was having a lot of problems and I was running away a lot. I detached in such a way that I wasn't even present during school. Teachers were calling me out of class and saying they knew what was going on and would I share with them what was happening, and I always covered it up. I wasn't able to even formulate the verbiage to say what was happening in my life. I would say there was every type of abuse imaginable, even spiritual abuse, that I endured in this environment. So I took off, and it was actually through hitchhiking that prostitution became a reality for me. So I was compromising myself sexually for survival purposes with grown men, and I was just a child. But they gave me food, and they gave me shelter, and made me feel obligated. And I was passed among the truck drivers So, there's statistics out that say, I think it's like 3 in 5 kids will be approached within 48 hours and pulled into the sex industry that have left home. And my experience and the experience of the women that we work with, I find that the majority of us have been pulled in by the actual customers, not pimps. I ended up in Denver, Colorado, where I did end up with a pimp, but I was being taken advantage of by so many men that this pimp actually gave me information that was very useful to me in the life that I was really forced into having simply because it was the only way I could survive. And it's kind of like going to prison and you're among all these predators. So out on the street, I'm a kid, I'm around all these predators, be it those that want to exploit me for money and those that want to exploit me for sex. So finding the one who could protect me from the others, to whatever degree that was, seemed like the best thing at the time. And for me, it actually was, simply because I learned things I was doing I didn't have to do. And so it gave me a little bit more knowledge about the street life, really not understanding life at all, wanting to get to the other side, but not knowing how to get over to the other side, being out on the streets in different cities, watching women drive by me and thinking, how do I get there? And I pictured them like, oh, they have their lives all together and people love them and they have, and that's not always the case. But in my mind, that's how I pictured other women, except for women and girls like me. And so I was fortunate because in the 3rd grade, a neighbor had taken me to church, and she's passed away since then. But and I heard about Christ. And that's when I accepted Christ. And I was in the 3rd grade, and I went home, and I remember all week long just skipping home from school, and Jesus had died for me, and it was so awesome, and so I was so excited, and I shared with my family, and I wasn't raised in this Christian environment, so it wasn't like nurtured, but through all of these dark years that I was through, that's who I talked to continually. And so I was in different places around the country, and I've endured a lot of trauma, not only the trauma in my childhood, but trauma from the life, from different Johns, which are customers, from different pimps. So I've endured a lot of physical abuse and a lot of mental and emotional abuse. And as I mentioned, the spiritual abuse that I endured as well in my home, and then sexual abuse. And I feel that prostitution in and of itself is violence against women and children, and that it is it's paid rape. And really being able to heal and to understand what I experienced is quite overwhelming. I found that my value came in my body, that I had no other value. And I believed that for many, many years. And I still struggle from the child abuse because of lack of relationship with family. And so I think that's part of something that I will always desire and may never have. And so I always wanted love, and I found that love, and I can talk about that later, I guess, because it's more of my story later on with my son. But I do feel that child abuse is so damaging. I remember being knocked to the ground and splitting from myself. And that moment, I knew I was different, and I was going to do whatever I had to get away. And that skill of detaching from myself became a very useful skill in prostitution. I would completely detach and be like an observer of what was happening. And I couldn't feel anymore. And I just became hardened to survive. I would ask why, because I talked to Jesus nonstop. I was in a very dangerous life, jumping in and out of strangers' cars. And I would talk to Jesus, and one, I would pray for protection. But secondly, I would ask why. Why is this my life? Why is this happening to me? And I never understood until one day when it all made sense. So I endured all this craziness, saw a lot of horrible things, knew a lot of girls and women who had been murdered, worked in many different states. I came back to Kansas City in 1988, and I had left another pimp situation, and I was determined not to get back with the pimp. And the reason that I was, I just kept cycling like a domestic violence cycle. It was like my stepfather, just different faces, and so the abuse just continued and continued. And I was so determined. Well, in 1988, when I came back to Kansas City, I met Veronica, and she was about 14, and I was probably 24, 25 at the time. And they say our brains aren't fully developed till we're 25, 26. So I am like getting to that point, I guess, where, my brain is wired and I'm thinking things through a little better and trying to really get out and not go back to another pimp situation. And I met this young girl, and she's in a bad situation, and she comes up to me and she tells me why she's prostituting, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I know she's a runaway. I can't get involved in this. And so she keeps talking to me every time she sees me, and she had put her father in prison for what he had done to her. And in return, she had been thrown out of the house. And I always admired her courage to stand up to her abuser. Whereas I just ran, she stuck it out and fought. She did become a throwaway child, which we have that here in the United States on a huge level, runaways and throwaway children. And so she told me that, and it was like this light bulb moment for me. And I thought, how many other women and girls have I known all these years that have this same kind of history? Because I'm looking at her and I'm like, this is me. This is me all over. And so that was like a first light bulb moment that I had. And then I had another friend, and I was using drugs at this time just to cope with my life. And I had my own place, and I didn't know how to do all these things. I mean, a pimp, he controlled all the money, so he provided things. So now I'm renting apartments, and I'm trying to pay bills on time, and I'm trying to do things I've never done before. And I can just remember I would lay on my couch and moan in agony and pray that God would not let me wake up, because I just wanted to die. If there was nothing else for me, if all I was created to do was be a whore, I just wanted to die. And I would wake up and I would be like, I can't believe I'm still here, you know? And so it was painful because I was taking my thought, and my thoughts were like all jumbled, like a ball of yarn, and just knotted. And so I was taking each piece of my thinking and I was looking at it, and I was saying, what is true in this and what is false in this? And I was trying to figure out the truth. And it was painful because I had no one to process this with. I was so lonely. And Veronica was so young, and I didn't want to put my problems onto her. And so I would work, and I would pay my rent up for like 3 months, and I would just stay hidden away in my apartment. And, you know, I bought this picture. I still have. It's not a picture. It's words. And it says, within every setback is a built-in opportunity for a comeback. And words can be very powerful. And I had lost everything. I had nothing. And I'm not talking about just materially. I had an apartment. I had some things, but I'm talking about everything. I didn't have anyone, nothing. And so I would read this, and it would strengthen me. And I would talk to God, and I would pray that, you know, provide a way for me or let me die. Provide a way or let me die. And so I ended up involved with another guy, and not a good guy. And, you know, I don't want to judge him. He has his own story. But so we were never together very long periods of time, and like 2 weeks probably tops, you know, and I would be like, get out, because it was my apartment. So I kind of had that authority, you know, which I had never had before. It was always me having to leave situations. And I ended up pregnant. And I was like, oh, wow. I cannot bring a baby into this. My life is such a mess, you know. And I was praying, you know, God, help me with this. I can't have a baby. I had a daughter that I wasn't raising, you know. How could I have another child? And my life is so messed up. I thought I was having a miscarriage, and I went to the emergency room, and I was like, oh, thank you, God. I'm not going to have this abortion. I mean, this is my thinking, you know. I didn't know what God had in mind. So I'm in there, and they wanted to see if there was a heartbeat. So they put the gel on my stomach, and the moment I heard his heartbeat, a miracle happened in my life just that quick. It was like I was in the dark. I had been in all this confusion. Nothing made sense in my life. And all of a sudden, I could see. And it was so instantaneous, and it was a true miracle. And God spoke into my spirit. He said, you have this baby. I'm bringing you out. I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know what that meant. I just knew it was going to happen. I got off the table. I walked out. My girlfriend was out there in the hall waiting for me. I said, I'm having this baby. And she looked at me and she goes, oh, this is a God thing. And I said, oh yeah, it's a God thing. I quit using drugs. I'm 20 years clean. My son's 19, never been to drug treatment. God just took it away from me. My depression, that heavy, dark confusion that I couldn't see, I couldn't see any hope, I couldn't see a way out, that was gone. What wasn't gone was, how do I still pay my bills? And so I continued in prostitution, but on a huge risk reduction level. And I know this is not what people understand, and I want people to understand this. People will do whatever they have to stay alive. And everyone's reality is not the same. And so I use how God brought me through and out to work with the women at Veronica's Voice, because there's no money. I can't put these women in a safe place and say, you're fine. We're going to work on your healing process. We're going to move into some vocational training. You're going to have a whole new way of life, because there's no funding to do that. We have to work, as sad as this is, on a risk reduction model and an exit plan to move them out a year, 2 years, whatever it's going to take. Because we have not had huge support. But I will say God comes through when he needs to, always. And it is just the reality of what this looks like. And so you may ask, where did this name Veronica's Voice come from? Well, the little girl that I met in '88, Veronica, we became very close. And in 1993, the week she turned 21 years old, she was murdered. And she left behind children. And she left a scar within me, because she was the first human being that I really connected to, authentically connected to. And that was a huge thing in my life at 24, 25 years old. And so I named it to honor her and to bring remembrance, to keep her memory alive, but also to honor all of the women and girls that are stuck and trapped in this lifestyle, and to offer a voice and to become an advocate to expose what this is, as I try to reach back and help pull sisters forward out of this life. My son was 4 months old when Veronica was murdered, and I took everything I had and put it in storage. And I went to a homeless shelter with him. And from there, I went and signed up for public housing. And I signed up for welfare. And I utilized everything I could, any services. But I was terrified of being found out. If they find out who I really am, because I still had that identity of I'm a prostitute. I didn't recognize, I've prostituted. That's not who I am. It was still who I was in my thinking. I got off the streets. I worked 1 day a week. I went to school. I worked 1 day a week with another female. So I had really reduced my risk. And I continued doing that through school. Then when I got my job, I had 2 regular guys that I saw. I quit running the ad with her. I just saw these 2 regular guys. And I was like, God, if I can work a year, I know I can do it. Because I had never seen anyone get out of the life except to be murdered. And so I worked a year and I cut them loose because I knew I could do it. So I get this phone call, and they say, we want to give you, the Sisters of Charity of Leavenworth, $25,000 seed money to start a program for prostituted people. And I sat at my desk and I literally bawled, because it was like it all made sense. And I had been asking God, please make it make sense. I've been through too much for too long, 24 years. I know too much about this. And it's got to be told. Somebody has to shine the light on what this really is. And I'm willing to do it. And so that's how it happened. We have a John School, which is not the end-all, be-all to solving the demand side of this, because the demand is what drives it, like with any other commodity. I hate to use that word when we're talking about human beings, but and so we do that. We provide services to the women and girls, and we have a partner, Ozen Pathways, that we partner with, that they provide services as well and house the youth. And then we provide all our adult services. So we have a safe center where the women come and they get focus groups there. We take them to different activities in the community, different type of events where they can get spiritually fed. And these are type of things that are are optional. We do peer counseling, and we offer peer support. We work on a risk reduction model, like I said earlier. So we do risk reduction and exit planning. So, we ask, and we look at the whole industry. It doesn't matter if it's a girl from the strip club, if it's a boy hustling up at the Liberty Memorial, a transgender, a woman, a girl. If they are being commercially sexually exploited in any way, we will work with them. I want you to know that you are loved. And you are so much more than what society says you are. If you're in prostitution, you're not a prostitute. You're doing what you have to survive. You may be trapped in a pimp-controlled type of situation. You may be calling out to God. You may know God. You may feel abandoned. And just don't give up hope.
As Kristy just said, there is hope for those who have been victimized by the sex industry, and there is help too. Jesus has set an example for us to follow. When a woman was caught in the act of sexual immorality, all the Pharisees wanted to do was to stone her to death. But he sent them away and came alongside her and spoke tenderly to her and told her that he did not condemn her. You see, Jesus came to save those who are lost, not to condemn them. He came to set the captives free and to bring life to all who would turn from their former life to follow him. And you are beloved and precious to him. And if you give your life into his hands, he will turn your life around and give you heaven for the rest of eternity. Until next week, I'm ep31 for Pure Passion.